was quite a long process in such a truncated amount of time that we had to create Marcy. And I feel like both the costume designer and my makeup artist, everybody worked together really nicely to create this really, three-dimensional person.
I'm very excited to chat with you, Morena, especially for Fast Charlie. It is such a fun movie from start to finish, and I love yours, Pierce's dynamic and characters. What about the project really sparked your interest to want to be a part of it?
The combination of people involved, Pierce and Philip. I've always been a fan of Philip's work since Rabbit Proof Fence. And the character, really. Those two have such an interesting dynamic. The character stories are really fascinating. And I hadn't seen this woman before, somebody who's trying to put her life back together, gets sort of drawn back into the mess that her husband left behind, and then sparks this really interesting relationship with an older man, all while being on the go. There's a lot of really interesting dynamics and emotional arcs in the story, as well as really fun action stuff.
It really is such a great blend of so many different kind of genre things that I loved to watch. Now, when I spoke with Philip the other day, actually, he mentioned you came in a little later in the production. And I'm curious, given that you and Pierce have such a close and unique dynamic throughout the movie, what was it like from an actor's perspective, trying to find that rapport and that dynamic with one another without the prior rehearsal time that you might normally get on a shoot?
Yeah, it was definitely fast and furious. And they came at me, like I was, I think, in the middle of a vacation with my family or something, and I had to rearrange a bunch of stuff. It wasn't ideal in that sense, but when you work with professionals, it's just an amazing experience. Both Philip and Pierce have done this for a little bit. So we came in and we had the meetings necessary, and Pierce is such a unique actor. He's so giving. He creates such a rich emotional life for himself that it's just easy to kind of join in. We really connected as people, and that made it a lot easier as well. But he's such a professional and such a class act, and it was just such a joy to jump in with him. And he's so open and willing, and it didn't. You get nervous meeting movie stars. What are they going to be like? Are they going to be jerks? Are they going to have certain ego things, that are going to get in the way? And there was absolutely none of that. And it was such an easy process, to just get to know him and jump into these roles together.
Well, similar to you, I'm a longtime fan of his, so that's great to hear that he doesn't bring any of that to his work. Now, with that said, was there any one moment you remember during filming where that chemistry and rapport with one another really felt like it clicked, or did it feel like it was almost immediate with you two?
The shooting schedule was quite intense. It was a small budget film, and we were not shooting long days, but just had to get a lot of material done very quickly because we didn't have it in the budget to have long days. And I sort of felt from the beginning, our stuff together, our characters are such that, my character is a bit guarded. So it was fairly easy to jump in the sense that the scenes where they're a little more open to each other happened later and towards the end of the film and the end of the shooting. So I don't know if that was orchestrated on purpose by Philip or not, but it definitely helped us to get to know each other slowly. We shot a scene very early on where I bandaged his leg up. And I had a very hard time with that scene, actually. I know it's sort of like the opposite of what you asked, but it didn't click for me in that moment. And I look at the scene now, and it actually really works that these characters are kind of disconnected and having two different experiences. So for whatever reason, I think because of who Marcy is and who Charlie is, it kind of worked that we were sort of unraveling this relationship together. By the time we did reshoots, and we were shooting actually the end of the film and some of the reshoots, the relationship was much more there. We had quite a few car scenes. And I would say those were the scenes where I think I felt most connected to Pierce, because it was just the two of us sitting in a car together, talking, and being kind of like having these quiet moments.
It does really show well. And that the leg scene in particular is one that I really felt was like the opening of the door for you two to break that guard
Mm.
down. So I love that. Now with Marcy in particular, though, what aspect of the character did you find was the easiest to connect to for you in bringing her to life?
I really appreciated that she lived, Philip picked this house for her that is so phenomenal. She lives on at the edge of the world, like right by the water, in a house on stilts. And it just tells you so much about her. She's literally trying to elevate her life, be away from everybody else, and start over. And I really sort of identified and connected with this notion that, you can have regrets and you can have made mistakes, but you have an opportunity to start fresh. And she just wanted to be quiet, mind her own business, do her taxidermy, start over again. And of course, trouble found her because, as it does in a complicated life, with when you have history. So I just really loved that, the complication of somebody wanting and needing peace, but just not being able to have it yet.
I love that house in particular. It is such a beautiful house. I was like, I wouldn't mind living there at some point.
Yeah.
How involved were you in the actual look of Marcy? Obviously, actors can work with wardrobe to tweak little things here and there, but I'm curious how much of that was, or how much of her look was you and how much was maybe the wardrobe and makeup department?
We all worked very closely together. The makeup artist, Sarah, and I have known each other for quite some time. We worked together in Gotham. And I brought her on board in this film because I felt that Marcy's look, on such a small budget, was going to be really important. I was doing some research on taxidermists, and they are a very interesting kind of people. I mean, I know everybody's different, and within the same, profession, you can look many different ways, but they tend to have this kind of edge, and this, like, a lot of them had tattoos, and they spend a lot of time alone with dead things. And I found that really fascinating. And I wanted that to come across in how she looked. Not to mention that she didn't have a lot of money and wasn't, necessarily at all in like a visible, in a glamorous way. So I worked really closely with the costume designer, who was fantastic. And we wanted to make her look, like she utilized her clothes for work. There was not an aspect to her that cared about how she looked. We used almost no makeup. That was the look we ended up going with, which was so liberating as an actor to feel like you could just use your skin and yourself, and still create a character. And the tattoos were huge and very stressful in the beginning because we had to, you have to get licenses for all the different artists and art that you use in a film. And so it was stressful to make sure that we had it in the time period that we needed to. And I thought that it's also a very personal decision when somebody gets a tattoo, that's something that's going on their body for a long time. So I wanted to think about what that would be for her and what each one would signify. So it was quite a long process in such a truncated amount of time that we had to create Marcy. And I feel like both the costume designer and my makeup artist, everybody worked together really nicely to create this really, three-dimensional person.
Well, I love the work that went into it. She really does feel, like you say, a well-rounded three-dimensional character. So, and yeah, you bring her to life so well. What was it like then the day you got to meet James Caan for your scene together? Because he's obviously, much like Pierce, a established veteran in the industry. And even though you don't have much time together, it is a pretty heartwarming scene.
It is. It was it might have been my first day on set or close to that. So I was very nervous for myself, but also to meet James Caan. I mean, it's not every day you get to work with an actor like that. And I'm such a huge fan of his work. He was very sweet. I can't believe that we got to shoot this film with him. He looked very fragile, and was easily exhausted. And it was a process. And he played around a lot too, which was really fun to see. And we sort of couldn't, his character is suffering from dementia. So we kind of couldn't tell what was him like being in character and what was some stuff that he was actually messing up, and it just all lent itself to that person, when Pierce and I were around him in the scenes, you had this feeling of like not knowing what was going to happen next. And that was really kind of cool because that's sort of what it feels like to be in a scene with that character. And he was a real champ. I mean, I think he shot 2 or 3 days, and they were quite long days for him. But he was able to pull through and be, in good spirits about it. But you could tell he was getting tired.
Understandable. I mean, he's not a young guy anymore, not Godfather age.
Yeah.
He still killed it in this movie. I see I'm almost out of time. So before I let you go, I mean, as everybody else is, I'm super excited that Vanessa's coming back for Deadpool 3. I know you can't tell me anything without the Marvel snipers coming in, but I'm curious, what is something you're looking forward to getting to explore with Vanessa and Wade heading into the next chapter of this franchise?
I think it's really cool that these, that they are such well-met characters and that their lives, you can see them in and out of each other's lives constantly. In the comics, it's the same way. So I think that the franchise and Ryan and the director, they've done a really great job of sort of always reinventing that relationship and making it interesting, but maintaining the core thing that keeps them always coming back to each other. So I think there's a little bit more of that in this film.
I love that. And so production recently resumed on the movie. Are you involved in the current production right now, or is your work already done on the movie?
My work is finished on the film.
Okay, great. Well, very final question. Last time we spoke was for Greenland, and I really enjoyed that movie, and they've got a second one in the works. I'm curious if you've heard any updates on possibly coming back for Migration.
I am standing by as we speak. We are in the midst of negotiations, so I am keeping my fingers crossed. I hope it works out.
I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for you as well. I'd love to see more of your character in that movie as well. But in the meantime, I really look forward to spreading the word about Fast Charlie. Like I said at the top, it is such a fun movie. I think people are going to really get a kick out of you and Pierce in it. And I greatly appreciate you taking the time.